Sorry to cut you off. I just had to say, it's radio. I got obligations. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Light, powered by AtlanticCityFocus.com, and we're here with Tim Alexander, a civil rights activist, and we're discussing the current political climate. I apologize for cutting you off.
Right, and really
you're sharing some great information. I want to take it back to the Democratic Party because I know your time here with us is not infinite. I feel, and this is probably the only time you're going to hear me say this, I feel that taking I think the Democrats should take at least one page from the Trump playbook, and this is what I'm saying. I'm saying if Kamala Harris intends to run again, which I think she should be seriously considering, or whoever is planning to run, provided there is an election in 28, that remains to be seen. But they should. Donald Trump never stopped kicking and screaming or campaigning. Now, maybe his motivation was the grift. Maybe his motivation was staying out of jail. But it was effective that he remained connected to his base from the time he lost in 2020 all the way up till now. And so I don't think, I really think whoever the Democratic presidential candidates are, I think they should be out there talking about the issues, fighting back. And this is something you and I talked about off mic before. Just like you're here with me today, I can identify things that I know you won't brag about, but I can identify things that Tim Alexander has done and continues to do for his community that that your constituents or people who want to vote for you or want to support you can say, this is what Tim Alexander did on housing. This is what Tim Alexander did on food insecurity. This is what Tim Alexander did on maintaining voter rights and fighting voter suppression. Is it me, or why don't I see that from the Democratic presidential hopefuls?
No, it's not you, and you're 100% correct. And you could add in some of the things I'm proud of, along with the things you identified, is police reform.
Reform,
right? We submitted a proposal, and some of it was adopted. So
right.
The point of me doing those things was because I wanted to. Obviously, I ran for office. I wanted to do what I could do.
Right.
But when things didn't work out, I lost the election. The response that I thought, the conversations I had, let's put it this way,
right,
was, well, do we need the office to accomplish some of these things?
Thank you.
And so we when I say we, I'm talking about my wife and I and our supporters. We got to work. And so my whole goal is to demonstrate that to our politicians, by the way, to our elected officials, you don't need the office to accomplish things for community. If you're serious about representing people, then go represent them. Be a leader. Be in a leadership role. What we need now, going into this next election cycle, our gubernatorial one currently, our local races currently, going into the midterms next year, we desperately need leadership. And I will be the first one to stand outside. I have done it many times and protest. But protest only takes you so far.
Right. You have to be careful with that right now.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, and here's why.
Okay.
Because nonviolent protest met with violent response is not something we should be shy away from. We should be brave enough to go do it. What I've seen across this country, which is remarkable to me,
okay,
you talk about community activism. We have this push, or this immigration push to evacuate the country of anybody who we deem undesirable. Ideally, a lot of the immigrants who are getting ejected from the country tend to have brown skin, while we open arm welcome other immigrants who have white skin. And I'm talking about the South
African apartheid.
Right. Apartheid people, right?
Right.
So I think.
I told you, we're not here to be polite. We're
sure.
Here's the thing. You want to talk numbers? The number of immigrants that are here illegally that are committing gang activity are relatively small, and most of them now probably have been deported. So now the goal is to deport anybody we don't like with brown skin, and to bring over people from South Africa who have experience with being minority rule.
Without a question, and you can add in religious persecution as well, because if you happen to be of Muslim or Hindu faith, you got to go too if you're not here, even if you are here legally, a student at a university. So it's beyond anybody who speaks up against the tyranny of government. Also is on a target list for
Venezuela.
being ejected from the country. So, to that point, let's talk about that for just 1 second.
Sure.
The goal here is to thin out people of color, open up the doors for people European descent, or dare I say Africana, to come into the country and to restore the view of the country as identified by the person at the head of the executive branch.
Right.
So for me, what I've been seeing, and this is where I was going earlier, was that people are not just protesting, but they're engaging. Right. I saw a video of ICE officials in the neighborhood doing a sweep, and people came out and they just stood in the way. They didn't push back against ICE. They didn't risk getting arrested for touching a federal officer. But they stood out, they got in the way, and that prevented them from doing what they had to do. Okay. And there's an argument that is obstruction of government official, but I got to say that you have a right to be on the street. You have a right to be at a particular area on a public street. And if you happen to encircle somebody, like we saw with Mayor Ras Baraka, I don't see a problem with that, right?
Are ICE officers federal officers? You're a lawyer, so that's another reason why I wanted to have you here. Are they actually federal officers? Because what's to stop me and my boys from dressing up in black jackets and putting on masks and taking people off the street anytime we feel like it?
Well, ICE officials are federal agents. There's no question about it.
Okay.
The latter point that you just made, that you get a risk of what are you doing? So, just briefly on the law, I can go head to toe in a policeman's uniform and walk around, go to a Halloween party, whatever I want. It's the second that I try to exercise authority is when I've broken the law. So anybody could dress up like anybody.
How lawful is it for somebody to put on black jackets with no, even if you are a federal officer, is that lawful, putting on a black jacket and a mask and just snatching somebody off the street? Because to me, it may be legal, but it's dangerous on both sides.
Well, that's a policy question, right?
Okay.
It's not a legal question, it's a policy question. As the immigration officials who are overseeing those agents, if their policy is allow them to wear those masks, then there's no law against it.
Okay.
It does become tricky, particularly on lawsuits, and you want to talk about getting in the weeds, I'll avoid it, but just saying that when you're suing a federal official, you have to be able to identify who the person is. And when they're wearing the mask and the agency refuses to give you a list of the people who were involved in a particular action, then it becomes very, very difficult to bring lawsuits against them. In fact, we wouldn't take it because if we can't identify the individuals who were responsible, we know the case is going to get tossed at some point in the progress. It's a weird, and some federal judges won't enforce them providing the names. So it really becomes problematic, and that's a whole nother topic. But back to your point.
Sound like the Klan. I'm gonna leave it there.
But back to your other point, which was, can individuals dress up? Well, we've seen this, right, at the I can't remember the conference, Davos, right? The conference they hold over Davos, and people are coming in looking like ICE agents and stuff. And someone asked him, why do you do that? And he says, well, because it's fun to dress up this way and go to Walmart or go somewhere and see all the people run and get scared. Well, it's dumb, it's dangerous, but it's not illegal. It's illegal when you say stop police officer, stop federal agent, and you're not one, then you just broke the law. And if you have something on that identifies you as a law enforcement official, federal agent, and you give somebody a command, that's illegal. So in other words, I know this sounds really ridiculous, but you can dress up like a duck, you can walk like a duck, but as soon as you quack like a duck, you just broke the law if you're not a duck. Does that make sense?
It does, but then again, putting the ball back on our side, it makes a lot of the ways that we move look ridiculous.
Well, from a global standpoint, I don't think we
From
could.
a global standpoint,
we couldn't
no, but
possibly look more
you know what?
ridiculous
I
than
was
we
at the NAACP meeting last night, and I told a young lady that I met there, my biggest problem with the way things are right now is that many of the people on my side look at the world for the way they think it should be as opposed to the way it is. Let's be real. If somebody comes knocking on your door 3 o'clock in the morning with a mask on and all black, even if you are, your first inclination isn't that they're ICE agents. You're thinking they're here to do you some harm. Black people got into this situation because when white folks came to Africa, they said, "Come on in, we'll show you hospitality." So again, somebody comes knocking on my door in a mask 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to open the door and say, "Oh well, you know what? You're probably looking for some illegal immigrants. There's none here, but why don't you come in the house and have a cup of coffee?"
No, you don't have to.
But that's how we move.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not just showing up at your door at 3 o'clock in the morning with the regalia on. It's what you say, right? If you're knocking on my door and you're saying ICE or more succinctly federal agent or law enforcement, then the burden shifts to you, right? You can't just go out there blasting. If somebody just kicks in your door without saying anything and they're not wearing any identifying markers, then it could be somebody there to hurt you. And quite honestly, somebody could right now think this is the best way to do a home invasion. Let me just dress up like ICE and kick in somebody's door. And now next thing you know, they're walking out with all their goods or doing worse crimes against people, humanity. So,
Right.
It's a dangerous precedent that's being set by the administration.
Right.
They allow this masking of law enforcement, which, by the way, there is a time when it's appropriate to mask a law enforcement officer.
Okay, you learn me something.
Okay, so let's talk about.
I mean, I get undercover. I have friends who work undercover.
That's what I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
If you're undercover, but your department isn't huge, and so you have to participate in a particular law enforcement activity, then it's appropriate that you would wear a mask to protect whatever investigation you have going.
Gotcha.
But as a matter of policy, and everybody in the organization is wearing these masks, that's bad policy.
Okay.
That's terrible policy.
Okay. I'm going to change gears here because I know you don't have an infinite amount of time. And I do want to thank you for taking this time to be with us. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Light, powered by AtlanticCityFocus.com, right here on the campus of Stockton University, 91.7 WLFR. My guest is the great Tim Alexander. Tim, when you have it in your schedule, especially if you can come back before June 10th, I would love to have you back. My pager, my cell phone is blowing up, so I want to get to some of the questions. Again, I'm not here to be polite, so I'm going to talk straight. I can get a box from Walmart, set it up in the parking lot, and I think I'm supposed to get $2,000 a month for rent for that box. What, if anything, can be done about the housing situation, from the lack of housing to the prices for housing, which are, I'm saying this, not Tim Alexander, freaking sane.
So we can start right here at home in New Jersey. We have to enforce, and I mean this because we don't do it, we have to enforce the minimum affordable housing that is supposed to go up with new growth. And we don't. We just don't enforce it. Or we allow towns to zone in a manner in which it can't be built. So, this is education for me as well. I just recently learned that towns can change zoning, or have to change zoning, to allow affordable housing to be built in certain communities. Now, we also have to recognize that affordable housing in Bergen County is not affordable housing in Warren County or Cumberland County.
Right.
Different prices. So that's why this needs to be set regionally. Have regions where this is what the affordable housing range is. This is what the different region of the state.
Right.
There's so much we can do in New Jersey to create opportunities for affordable housing everywhere. People, and I'm being very honest, I didn't know this until recently about the zoning issue. I know that there's a fight that they want to take zoning out of local hands. Well, people will say that's overreach of Trenton, but I see it differently. I see it as a failure of local governments. So you don't blame Trenton for your failure to try to do something when you're failing to do it, because you don't want people who you perceive to be impoverished or not on your economic social status, and somehow they bring in crime. Right? I mean, that's the stereotype. That's the
Right,
BS
that's the stereotype
that's associated with it.
You know what, quote unquote, impoverished people bring? Liquid money.
All the time.
All the time.
Right?
We live in Atlantic County. There was a time, and this is how things have gone. 15 years ago, that same box, if I put it out there in the parking lot, it would have been a Cedar Mart in 5 minutes. Now, if I would say 5 years ago, if I put that same box in the parking lot, it would become a weed dispensary.
Listen.
So it's an out and out lie that single mothers, people on welfare, people with disability bring any more crime to any area than anybody else.
It's what's worse than a lie, because that's what it is, right?
Right.
It is a embedded stereotype in the minds of people who have been elected to positions in their local government to believe that, just to give you an example.
Right.
Here we are in Galloway Township, New Jersey, and there was an opportunity, a discussion about bringing a Amazon distribution center here.
Right.
Right? Now, what does that bring? It brings jobs, brings opportunity, but it also brings convenience to those who order from Amazon. And right now we know that there's some issues with DEI there, but we'll talk about that another time. The reality is that one of the oppositions to bringing that here in local government was those type of jobs, those type of warehouses bring criminal activity. Now, you show me anywhere in the history of history where a job brings criminal activity, unless it's the mob or something to that effect, right?
Right.
It is the most.
The job is criminal activity.
It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and it reminds me of Dr. Martin Luther King, who, when he said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the quote exactly, but any community, regardless of demographics, that doesn't have jobs has higher crime.
Right.
So, in the inverse of that, any community that has ample jobs have lower crime.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't you want to have jobs in your community? Because people who work in those jobs don't look like you. They don't live in the big, giant, mini mansions or whatever, and therefore they must be beneath you, and you are afraid of them. That is the real truth. And it's disgusting that somebody would even say that. They would say it holding a public office. And I hope that they're listening, because I'm talking about you, that you said that, and you effectively blocked jobs and opportunities, and shame on you. Shame on you. And that is the reality even with affordable housing. Why, and where can we put this affordable housing that we can isolate them? Remember the old other side of the railroad tracks, right?
Right.
Look at, we could go all across this country where we see affordable housing separated by a highway or a row of railroad tracks.
Right.
Because there's this belief that we'll just keep them out of our communities. Right. And it's absolutely absurd. It's such an equation that I cannot even imagine what their conversations are like in their households, because it's, if you're saying some of the stuff you're saying in public, I can only imagine what you're saying behind closed doors.